Hello everyone, so I just got back from a screening of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I love the Indiana Jones movie, so I was very much looking forward to this one. This one comes in at just a little more than 2.5 hours long. It is rated PG-13, directed by James Mangold. Of course, I was super excited when I heard that he was going to be attached as the director of this product. And of course, it stars Harrison Ford back in the role of Indiana Jones for the last time. And a pretty stacked cast in terms of Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Antonio Banderas, Mads Mikkelsen in this one as well. So yes, without further ado, let me get into my review for the final installment of Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones franchise, Dial of Destiny. So I will say, in order for me to really express my feelings about this movie, I do got to dive into spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want it to be spoiled, please save this video, watch the film, come back to this review once you've done so. So yes, you have been warned, but the IMDb synopsis for this film is that archaeologist Indiana Jones races against time to retrieve a legendary artifact that can change the course of history, which is the Dial of Destiny. And again, see, this Dial of Destiny is dated back to Archimedes and has some very personal history with Harrison Ford, with Indiana Jones. The bulk of this movie takes place in 1969, but it does do some flashbacks during World War II, where Indiana Jones and his friend Basil Shaw take down some Nazis, steal the Dial of Destiny away from them. Mads Mikkelsen's character wants basically this dial to change the course of history for himself, but they take it away from him. Years later, Mads Mikkelsen is back and he wants to, again, to make sure that he has both pieces of this dial so that he can change the course of history. Again, to his friend Basil kind of goes off the rails and he dies, and just obsession with what this dial can do. And his goddaughter, and it's revealed that Indy has a goddaughter who is Basil's daughter, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And yeah, they basically both find themselves caught up in a mess between Mads Mikkelsen's and his group of Nazis, and of course the US government and a bunch of people who basically want, again, to this dial for themselves to wield this amazing power. So for about the first 20 or so minutes, it felt like this movie was going at a pretty solid pace when it comes to the opening sequence and kind of the flashback of young Indiana Jones during World War II, taking on these Nazis, getting the Dial of Destiny, and wanting to put it in, of course, the museum and hide it away in the way that he wanted to. There was some good story and really good setup that was done at the start of it. And honestly, some pretty solid action that I did quite enjoy. But I found that after that, this movie just was very tedious in terms of it building up the story, building up the stakes, doing a whole lot of things that again, too, just felt like it really took way too long to get finally running again and then off the ground. It is bolstered by some very well done action sequences that may not be the most realistic or may not be the most akin to best within the franchise of Indiana Jones. A lot of it seems very cartoony. There are, again, to a lot of issues in terms of continuity during the scenes. There's even some scenes too that's Harrison Ford's whipping people around at a table, like scaring them off. They all pull out guns and fire at him, but he ducks on the table, but no one thinks to just lean and shoot, things like that. A lot of people don't finish the job, and times that just would have made a whole lot more sense. Even to Mads Mikkelsen near the end, there's no reason for him not to kill Indiana Jones within the position that he had him in. Things like that, that just, again, to continuity errors of just kind of logic within the characters that make them really unlikable in a lot of ways, make you not want to root for them in a lot of ways. Just little things like that that really took away from the spectacle that was going on in some really decent scenes and scenarios that these characters were put into. But again, too, very tedious, and a lot of that I think is due to the runtime. I don't think it needed to be 2.5 hours long at any point. Most of the Indiana Jones movies were 2 hours long, and I felt like that was just the perfect runtime, and they could have easily cut that down, especially near the end of this movie, which I will get into in a little while here. But yes, a lot of the striking on has to do with, again, two characters of Phoebe Waller-Bridge and, again, to a young kid that she kind of takes on under her wing. They're both thieves. they're both not good people that just put themselves in the worst situation, and it's really hard to root for them because, of course, too, it's just this is who you are. You get yourself in the trouble. Sure, you can get yourselves out, but they're putting other people in harm's way, and they're very selfish. And again, too, they're just really hard to get to as characters. I found that again, too, the young, almost short round like character wasn't likable in any ways and didn't grow on me throughout the most of the movie. But Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character did start to get smarter and care more about her as the movie went through. So I can definitely give her that little bit of a prop. But also, too, one thing that really took away from this movie for me is that a lot of the times it felt like Indiana Jones was a side character within his own movie. This focuses a lot on the villains, a lot with Mads Mikkelsen, focuses a lot on the side characters, but you just don't really get to know a lot about them. And I found a lot of times the actors were really wasted. Found Antonio Banderas could have been a very cool character, but he was wasted. Again, too, you have John Davies within this, who I found was wasted. Mads Mikkelsen, in a lot of ways, felt wasted. Boyd Holbrook is playing one of, again, too, the henchmen of Mads Mikkelsen's characters, and I found that he was absolutely wasted, where there was no personality to his character at all. He just felt like an extension of his gun, where he was just all he did was shoot, really. And I just found that was really annoying. And he wasn't a good villain. I didn't find him intimidating because, again, too, all he did was shoot his gun, and that was a lot of Mads Mikkelsen's henchmen in this. And again, too, when you really look at Mads Mikkelsen's character, the entire movie, he is just coattailing off of other people's success and thinking that he can do better, he can do better, he can do better. But they never give him the opportunity to do that. And again, too, well, I know that's a big point of just mocking the physicist within him, but he's just not an interesting villain. A lot of the things with the previous Indiana Jones movies is they were always one step ahead because they were brilliant people, but he was just an idiot who was coattailing off of people and getting lucky in a lot of ways that he was just able to follow them. It's and again, too, it was just his men doing all the physical labor for him, but they were had no personality to them. They weren't interesting, and he wasn't interesting because of that. It's because, again, too, he wasn't doing anything himself. He just happened to be one step behind, but never one step ahead of Indy. So again, too, while the performances in this movie are really, really good from Harrison Ford, from Phoebe Waller-Bridge, from Mads Mikkelsen, their characters are just boring and bland in a lot of ways. You do get a lot of life between Phoebe and Harrison Ford, and just because, again, too, their characters' relationships are so deeply rooted to one another, and they have their motivations, and they start to care for one another a lot. And there's some great conversations that Indy has about his son, about the people he's lost. It is really well done and really well crafted, and just, again, too, moments where you just find really good sparks of hope within this movie. But then, yeah, a lot of it is just really bland and boring and tedious, way more than it's good for. Again, too, I found the mystery within this was something not too hard to solve or not really interesting. Again, too, when you're comparing it to Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Last Crusade, and even to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I found that there was some more interesting things within it. And I will say I did like this more than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but not really a whole lot as it goes through it. The thing that really took me out of this movie was Mackenzie, when they talk about this dial and how it can be used as almost a way to jump back in the time. I was getting really, really nervous about it. And then there was all these things we saw where you saw the dial. There's depictions of it with a watch, the dial, again, too, you'll see a tomb that has a phoenix on it, but the phoenix has propellers. And I kept thinking, like, oh no, fuck, they're actually going to go back in time. They're actually going to do it. And they do. And the era that they go back to was just, again, to one of those things that was just way too perfect for the plot. It didn't really make sense in a lot of ways that they'd be transported exactly back to this era because they messed up their again, through their calculations and flying into this storm. It would have made sense if it was just because of the dial was only a one-way tickets to where they wanted to go. And again, too, they didn't know how the dial worked, that it would take them back to 1939 Germany. And again, too, well, Mads Mikkelsen's plan was kind of sinister and scary in terms of its consequences of creating a World War II where they kill and replace Hitler so they can win the war. Again, too, it has some terrifying implications to it, but I just don't get why they had to go back in time the way that they did. I think it would have worked a lot better if the plane split apart and Harrison Ford, or sorry, Indiana Jones had visions of what he saw, what we actually got in the movie, but not actually, again, to transporting to this time would have been a much better way to show it. I'm really glad that he didn't stay in the past as he wanted to. Again, too, I didn't really find that his decision made a lot of sense, that he was just going to give up on the world and, again, to completely alter history in a lot of ways, what he studied his whole life. Why would he want to alter that? That's something I couldn't really get behind. I just felt that really came out of left field in a lot of ways. Yeah, and there's just so many things with this movie that really held it down. But again, too, the music, of course, is great. Some of the directing was great in points. Some of it, I found the fight scenes were just way too zoomed in or cutting angles really, really fast. There are some absolutely brutal scenes where people get messed up, falling under cars, being tossed from planes. Again, too, there's some really brutal scenes that happens and some brutal deaths, but nothing like what we've seen in previous Indiana Jones, where there's really a lot of shock value. There's a few moments where you think, "Ooh, like that guy got hit hard," but nothing terrifying like the face melting scene or the eyeballs in Crystal Skull like melting in people's faces. There's nothing absolutely crazy like that. I think into maybe some people that might be good for the movie in a lot of ways. I just found again too it did held it down a little bit. But the one thing I will applaud this movie for a lot is it felt like this movie could have come out in the 70s because of how authentically it was filmed and it looked and it was acted. Like again too, it felt like an Indiana Jones movie that could have came out 40 years ago by watching it. So it was really, really true to the tone, the time, and what came before it in terms of filming and setting and color grade and the angles, camera angles that they use, things like that. It was really, really cool to see James Mangold shape it in this way. So his directing, for the most part, was pretty stellar and pretty amazing with what he was able to accomplish with it. Yeah, overall, I do just really feel let down by this movie in a lot of ways. And with all of this taken together, I'm going to have to give Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny a 6 out of 10. I'm in no rush to get back to this one, and I can only really recommend it as a, again, too, if you're an Indiana Jones fan, this isn't something that's going to win you over. I do think it's better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but it's not much better in a lot of ways. I didn't find it to be a fitting end to Indiana Jones, at least in terms of his adventure. There's so many better things this movie could have done. Again, to relying on these new characters that they don't really give a lot of depth into was a big mistake, I think, within this movie, when they could have brought back classic characters that he's interacted with in the previous movies, especially in terms of characters like Short Round and whatnot, because they're way better written characters and just so good in a lot of ways. It's what they added into this movie felt shoehorned in a lot of ways. Just lacking of life, lacking of depth, and that's the main problems I have with Dial of Destiny. But if you've seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. And of course, if you like this review, definitely give it a thumbs up. You can check out everything I do on the channel through a playlist down below. And I'll like some up top here for convenience sake. Thank you for subscribing and turning that little ringer on so you know when I upload new videos. And yeah, just awesome, guys.